Welcome to Insightly. I'm Melissa McGinn.
And I'm Jordan Walker. We're your hosts on a mission to empower executives and business leaders with the knowledge they need to turn data into a driving force for innovation. Join us every episode as we share real-world case studies and provide practical tips to unlock the full potential of your business through data and analytics.
So if you're ready to transform your relationship with data, hit that subscribe button, because in the world of business, insight is power.
Hey, Alyssa, welcome back.
Hey.
What's been happening lately?
A lot of things. I mean, I feel like there's a lot going on with this, which this podcast is not about, on a macro level. But I'm feeling good, like, on a personal level in this Q.
Yeah.
Q1 is always, like, kind of interesting for us, like, business-wise.
Yeah.
It's always, like, hurry up and wait kind of vibes.
Yeah.
Q2 is when things actually start happening.
Yeah. I feel like for me, it's closing out end of year. Q1 is really when a lot of like strategic planning really starts taking place with a lot of my clients. And so to me, it's kind of like easing into the new year because it's like more conversation for us.
So do you do strategic plans like in Q1 for 2025?
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's not my choice, but over the last like several years, that has been the trend where the intention is that you do more of that planning in like Q3 and Q4 so that you've got everything solidified.
You lose a whole quarter of action.
Yeah, but a lot of times what ends up happening is Q4, like you might already have your budgets set and whatnot and just kind of taken off of like historical and some like, you know, higher level ideas of what you maybe want to explore. But what I've often found is that the actual planning of how we're going to strategically go after some of these initiatives is not, that conversation is not happening until Q1 because a lot of companies are trying to close out their to-dos and their goals in Q4. And literally once you hit Thanksgiving, it's over. Like, bye. You know, we're in cleanup mode. We're all trying to get out at the same time. So my personal preference is that we're starting strategic planning
before
in August, you know,
Oh.
like, and starting to evaluate, okay, like we've already gotten over the first 6 months of the year. Like, what are we seeing? Where's the organization heading? All that kind of stuff. So then we can start making some plans on what do we need to kind of workshop and explore so that by the time we hit Q4, we've got some good insights of what we need to do strategic planning. And I mean, to use my great grandma Walker's terminology, bless their little hearts, bless their pea-picking hearts. Such good intentions to try to do it, but like we might even have things on the calendar saying that we're going to explore this, but then it just keeps getting pushed back until like mid-January as a start date. We roll with it. We're good with it. We kind of like help wherever we can, like during those time frames. But
and I'm sure there's tons going on.
Yeah,
things on fire, goals to be met.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not the most important thing on their to-do list.
To be fair, I'm sure that what you do plays a huge part in their overall strategic plan. It's just the bigger the company, the more moving parts there are.
Yeah. And I mean, especially when you're going through budget conversations, like depending on if I'm working even with, let's say, the marketing director, sales director, they might have a particular direction that we think that we're going in. But if the CMO or CFO in Q4 ends up just like things can change a lot in that time frame. It's actually not a bad thing. It's not ever a scenario where like things just aren't happening in Q1. You're basically just continuing forward and then using Q1 as that level set of, okay, by March and April, now we're really going to town. Unless the only times that I see the typical strategic planning time frame happening in Q4 is with companies that are very cyclical along those lines. But I also work with a lot of entities where their fiscal year is like June to July. So it's a little bit different than the January to December.
It's super interesting to me because our work is like not at all like strategy in nature. Like we're not having cyclical strategic conversations. We're having strategic conversations that really don't apply to like, oh, what's our marketing plan for this next year based on what we've learned? Like you talking about that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's like not really how we work, but I should analyze some things because we had a client that well, we have the client now that we first started talking to them last June.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we just signed them.
Yeah.
And I think there's like some cyclical stuff in the sales cycle in terms of budget and
Yeah.
conversation, but it's really hard when you work across verticals to really understand like who works in what way.
Yeah.
But we're not at like the strategic planning level in the core departments. We don't really have that. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
but sometimes the work that we do precedes some of the strategic conversations.
Yep.
And then sometimes they get into it and they're like, oh crap, we don't have the data. What
They
are we
don't have
gonna
the
do
data,
now?
or they realize that other partners within the organization need to get involved. And
Yeah.
that's where I think a lot of those best intentions to get jump started really come in, because depending on like time of year, they still have things that they have to close out. They still have goals that they have to achieve.
Right.
And then they also have to add whatever we are serving like
Yeah.
on top of their workload. So like I get it, but I think it would be interesting for like to kind of, in that vein of things, like maybe even choosing like 5 client types to like start with, and maybe you're going out and getting just some like qualitative feedback on, well, what does your company structure look like? Like, how do you guys operate throughout the year? When do you do strategic planning? Just asking some of those questions to see if you're seeing differences across verticals.
Yeah.
Or like what aha moments, if they say that like the best time to get in front of us is actually February, then change your process, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Take that note real
Yeah.
quick.
Thank you for letting me know.
For all the other people that I want to work with like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, today I want to talk a little bit about a topic that has subtly come up on our podcast every now and then. But this is a topic that, I kid you not, has come up like at least 5 or 6 times just in the last couple of weeks, where my clients are asking me about data dictionaries, or they're bringing up, we should probably do a data dictionary. And in some cases, here's actually my real question for you before we really get started.
Okay.
Have you ever been in a meeting where everybody is using the same word, but they're using it differently?
And they're just talking but not stopping to define it.
And so like everybody in the room thinks that we're all on the same page,
Yeah.
but then you leave and you find out that you're actually not, because the 5 different people in that room were all thinking about that word or that category or whatever differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. That's been on like a topic, but that's also been in like a role. So like we need to bring on an advisor, a business advisor. And like people think there's like coaches, there's like, you know, EOS implementers, there's this and that and the other.
Yeah.
So I've had that happen where it's like, yeah, we should totally get an advisor. Like we need help, you know, with this, this, and this. And like like who they go out and talk to is completely different.
Yes.
So yes.
Yes. That is why I find this topic of a data dictionary interesting, because even as I've been asked about data dictionaries, the way that people are using that term is even different.
Oh.
And or like, I guess, to the same point as what you just made, maybe not as in depth as what others would consider. So I want to have a discussion about data dictionaries and what they are, how you can use them, and just some like good advice that comes along with. So, okay, what is a data dictionary? It is ultimately, like, if you think about what an actual dictionary is, it's a glossary of terms, essentially, right? Like, what are the definitions of these different words that we use commonly in our language? Same thing, but think about it from the data that you have within your business, whether it's data fields or labels that are in a CRM system, or it's metrics and dimensions that you're looking at on a website analytics platform, or it's even like all of the convoluted terminologies that come through with what is customer engagement. What does engagement actually qualify as to us for our business? Because if I asked you, what does customer engagement look like, you would probably have a very different definition of it than I would, right? Because we come at customer engagement from different departments and different goals. So the data dictionary is like a standard operating procedure or a glossary that helps teams get on the same page, that if we're going into a meeting and we're using these terms, we all have the common definition of what that is and what it includes. But it also helps with data governance, because if you're starting to allow more accessibility within the tools and the platforms that you have where you're reporting data or you're capturing data, it helps people be able to jump in and start making some analysis or start doing some analysis or start pulling some reports based on maybe whatever goal that they're trying to achieve.
Could there even be multiple layers of this? Like,
Uh-huh.
so like customer engagement, you use that for example. So like there's the definition of like how are we using this term? But then I feel like there's a secondary part of it is like, and what does that mean to us?
Yes.
As an organization. So like we define it as, let's just say clicks on a website.
Sure.
Click-through rate. Let's say that's actually what we mean by customer engagement. That's probably not true.
It's fine. Yeah.
But how are we thinking about click-through rate?
Yeah. I think so. One example that I would maybe think of is, okay, from an aspect of customer engagement, marketing individuals think of the interactions that occur on platforms. So like you just said, visits to our website, clicks on our ads, likes on our social media posts. That's customer engagement. Sales or business development, though, probably considers customer engagement different in that, okay, well, they attend our webinars. They're coming to our happy hours. They're visiting us at trade shows. Like that's a different level of engagement where operations might literally just think customer engagement is the frequency of how often are they purchasing from us and what kind of growth are we seeing from them. You know, like maybe they're correlating customer engagement really just to the customer lifetime value type metric. So to your point, there are layers to this. So it's what is customer engagement in this case? Where does this play out in our organization? And ultimately, what are we like? Why does this matter to us?
Yeah.
And what are we hoping to learn from it? But even beyond just that, like basic definition, what a data dictionary should also include is the definitions of the labels and the metrics and the dimensions that are used on the platforms to help you calculate that particular category. In a non-technical sense, the data dictionary is a glossary of terms, but in where it veers off of just being a glossary is by helping to connect. These are the platforms and the outreach models or the departments that we utilize. Here's how that works. Here are the metrics and the dimensions that we use to calculate this. And here's typically why we want to know this. So if we're talking about customer engagement, well, maybe customer lifetime value does actually take into consideration the activities that our customers are doing with us. Like we are taking into consideration, maybe we're giving like a point to whether they follow us on social, they're signed up for our email, and they attend at least one of our webinars.
You love a good customer engagement scale.
I love a customer engagement scale. But then beyond that, maybe you're then looking at other things that show you customer engagement from, okay, what is their product mix? Like customer engagement to us means that they've made it beyond product one. And now we've got them on number one and number two.
And on some of the metrics, this could even include parameters.
Yes.
Like not all, it wouldn't be applicable to everything, but let's say it's more SaaS and you're looking at lifetime value and you're looking at churn and you're looking at reoccurring revenue. Like, okay, our standards are we want our churn to be below X percent. And if we want this to continue to get lower and lower, lifetime value, we want to get to higher and higher. Our standard is this.
Yes.
So then everyone also knows what's good and what's bad.
Yes. I love that you just made that point because really a lot of conversations, and I'm sure you hear this too, like when you're sharing information or insights that you're gleaning from the data, like a lot of times I get, well, what's industry benchmark? Well, okay, well, industry, if we've got it, looks like this. But for you, it actually looks like this, you know? And so being able to show like good, better, best from a benchmarking alongside the different data definitions that you have, I think is a really good point to make.
Yeah.
So at minimum, like if you're thinking about what a data dictionary kind of entails, think about it similarly to like a standard operating procedure. one, you're going to want to have just like the basic definition of the different data labels that you're looking at. So we talked about customer engagement, but it could also just literally be something as simple as revenue, transactions, like what is an actual transaction? In some cases, like a transaction is always going to be a sale, but what if we're talking about transactions from like an IT ticketing system that doesn't actually come with a dollar value sometimes, but that is still a transaction of sorts, So being able to like really define, like when we say this is what we mean. Here are the areas that we use it in. And then here are the ways that if you have to input the data, here's how we need you to input it. So like we've talked a lot about CRM systems on here. And one of the biggest challenges with CRM systems is the fact that it requires a human to enter in the data a lot of times. Well, humans are really great at being lazy. That means that if we're not doing it, then that's a problem. But if we are doing it, something as simple as like, okay, maybe you've got industry type or company type as one of your data labels in there. Okay, if I'm like, is company type the company, like somebody might interpret that as, well, it's the company name. No, but that's not what we mean. Do we mean industry? Do we mean a sector within? Maybe we have a vertical and we're wanting it to be labeled by sectors within industries. So defining like what we mean when we say client type in that data label, like this is what we mean by that. But then also giving what is that appropriate input? Let's say that you use that data label to indicate the different industry verticals that you have. Easy thing is to have a drop down in there already. But even in that, maybe your drop down has like industrial, manufacturing, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. But what happens if healthcare and manufacturing can also be industrial? As an example, right? So then being able to say, okay, these are our categories and these are the definitions of those categories. And here are company examples of what that looks like and why industrial is industrial and not manufacturing kind of a thing.
Also, I have like 5 thoughts, so
Okay.
I need to like order them. Also, which maybe you're getting to this, but I feel like it also could be important to say, okay, what do we mean by revenue? And then, for example, and then how is that actually identified as a true data label in the data?
Yeah.
And so a lot of different systems show that differently. And that's part of the hard work of combining data sources is because QuickBooks may call it customer ID and your ordering system calls it client ID.
Right.
And it's like, are those both our, that's a simple example, but are those both our customers? And like, is that actually an order? Is that a customer? And I think that's true, as you get down into like even more nuanced data points.
That's a real, so that is a great example because like outside of the data labels, you do need to couple that with the data sources. So here's the definitions of our data labels. Here are the data sources. And maybe you actually start with source and to make it more organized. Here are the sources. Here are the data labels within those sources, but here's how they correlate to other things. Like something maybe I love the example that you just gave of customer ID and client ID. They're same, and maybe in this example, they're the exact same thing, but different platforms that are labeled different things. So then when you get to the point where maybe you have an analyst coming in or somebody that needs to pull a report, if they want to correlate, the customer interactions or whatever from each of these platforms, they know I need to look at client ID over here and match that to customer ID over here. That then starts sending us into like customer data platforms and data warehouses and all of that kind of stuff. But even when you get there, a data dictionary is still incredibly important because like if you're building out a CDP, you still need to know what are the data sources that we're pulling from and how are these labeled so that we can correlate it to the true customer that we're talking about.
There's another layer of reinforcement that could be done on the reporting and analytics layer, which is we build it in a lot of hovers typically. So when you have a dash, and that's again, not to replace a data dictionary, but to reinforce it is like when you're looking at a metric shown in the chart and you hover over customer engagement,
Yeah.
it would say customer engagement means X, Y, and Z. Here's the industry standard and here's where we're at now.
Yes.
And it gives you maybe a red, yellow, green. This sets the standard and then you
Yes.
reinforce it in multiple places.
That's a really good example of that helps people that like, okay, if they're not going to go mine through anything, or if they're not in that like exploration mode, but they're seeing a dashboard, now you're kind of alleviating that challenge of if we're talking about this particular data set, or if I'm not in the room to describe it to you, you understand what like what we're talking about here and whether it's good or bad,
Exactly.
right? But
and that's not just made up by the analyst.
yeah,
That was like back to the dictionary that everyone talked about and hopefully across departments.
exactly. That's exactly where I was just getting ready to go. That's the thing that I actually love about this data dictionary conversation is because we know that data exists in every ounce of our organization. But as we've talked before, there are silos between different departments. And that's the challenge with companies having great accessibility with data because every department kind of owns their own thing. And the minute you start breaking down those data silos, if there's not a consistency across the board of like, we all understand what each of these things mean and how they correlate to the work that we're all doing together, then you just get the extra challenges of how do you actually report on success later on. But this gives you that foundation of this is what we mean. This is where it's coming from. Here is how it's correlated to other areas within our business or a sales model or whatever the case may be. And that actually can help you foster that data-driven culture because now you're teaching people and it could be served as a good onboarding tool for people as well.
Oh, 100%. I hadn't even thought about that because that's how you use SOPs. Is like, here's how we do this. And it's like an SOP. If I think this is like unlock for companies to like, that's such a basic thing. But if you can actually achieve the feat of getting all of these stakeholders in one room, plus other, that's probably a lot of people across an organization to actually hash this out and talk about it and get it written down and documented in an SOP that you can then clearly give to a new employee and say, here is how we do things. When you look at a dashboard that tells you about your sales pipeline and you hover over stage of sale, here's the stages and here's what this means to us and here's where we want to be in terms of time duration on each stage. Like, I hadn't even thought about that. I was just kind of like, data dictionary is like, cool. But I'm like,
there's so many uses for it. We live closer to the analyst side of things where we understand what analysts have to go through to clean data and blah, 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 blah. Well, and you know this as you're like starting to like onboard clients and you're having to like audit their data and then map metrics and all of that kind of jazz. Well, if as a company, you're going through the exercise of developing a data dictionary, everyone is now starting to kind of think like an analyst. You're identifying dirty data opportunities that need to get cleaned up. Like if you want to visualize something down the road, but it's not matching up and it's not done consistently on the front end, it's going to take longer to get you where you're at. So this is a good exercise that brings cross-functional teams together and then it fosters collaboration. So like there's a client
and builds culture.
100%. Like, so I have one client right now that is actively building a CDP and their customer data platform will be connected to a custom CRM system that they've developed for their organization. They also have a custom marketing automation tool that connects to the email and their text app notifications. So they've done a lot of infrastructure to get these platforms to fit within. There wasn't anything directly off the shelf that fit what they were trying to achieve. It was a better investment for them to actually go through and do their own. So they've got all of these platforms, but as they were going through that, they knew, and they started working on all this before CDPs really became a big buzz term in the industry. But in order for them to do this well, they were working with software engineers. They were working with their internal like data team, which existed in IT. This team is essentially like they're a growth team. And so they do a lot of like the advertising and community engagement and things like that. But they're the ones that are in charge of this.
Wow.
And so they're having to like make sure that they're speaking the same language with terminology as the software engineers that also speaks the same language with the data team, which is housed within IT. So like, as you can imagine, they're probably all thinking about these terms very differently. So they did the really smart thing early on by starting to like establish, okay, when you say that, what does that mean to you in a CRM or marketing automation software? Okay, when we say this, what does that mean to you? So that they were able to start correlating it. Now they're at the point where they have, because of all of the different things, there's buku IDs for one customer. And one customer, like technically, if you think about it, you've got companies and then you've got clients within a company or customers within a company. You might have 5 or 6 different decision makers within one company. So you've got a company ID, and then each one of these has like a sub ID on them. Same thing, but blow that up 10 in the number of IDs to keep track. They're able to fully map all of this now and connect the data, and they can kind of slice and dice things however they want.
That's truly amazing.
Yeah, but they would not be here. Like, I mean, this has been maybe like a 1.5-year journey so far for them. That is significantly faster for them, like, to have adopted all of this. And it's because of that data dictionary. Now, when they go into meetings and they're talking to all of these different stakeholders, everybody knows what's going on. And there's not this like back and forth of, well, that's not what I consider, you know? And so one of the things that I heard from the client is that they've even heard from the IT and software engineers how much fun the project has been because of how much collaboration has occurred. And they feel like they're being able to spend more time on developing the solutions and getting to the next step instead of
just misunderstanding each other. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, like this is such a common sense thing that a lot of times people don't do because it takes time to do it. But I'm here to advocate that like data dictionaries, we just need them. And it doesn't matter if you're doing anything like super duper complex. Like if you've got, you know, an email system, you've got your QuickBooks, and maybe you're, you know, running e-commerce or CRM or something like that, like just develop a standard operating procedure around those platforms if you're using them constantly, because over time you're gonna need that organization if you want to get to the next level of how to use data to help you innovate and make better decisions.
And just a side caveat, if you ever want to sell your business, this would be a huge value add, and I think a huge leg up in terms of like actual valuation of your company. Like people think that these things actually don't add valuation, but valuing a company is not the same as valuing real estate. Like it's not so cut and dry, it's more subjective. And if you can hand someone, like a lot of times we've built analytics that go into kind of the deal room for a deal, and we've heard, you know, anecdotally, like that's super helpful because the buyer has confidence in, okay, they have the data that they can even put this together.
Yeah.
They know the story that they're telling. They understand their customers. You know, the list goes on. I think the same thing is true for this. Here's the analytics, or here's the data, or here's our reports. And here's what we mean by all of this. And we have documented this.
Yes.
That is seriously like, and even if you don't think you're going to sell your company, you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so to have that, just as same as any other SOP, but with the increasing value of data and what that means for AI, for just like future innovation.
Yeah.
I think it could be more critical than just your average SOP on how to do another thing.
I think it's a good goal for every company to make because, you know, we talk about it every episode, but data is a huge competitive advantage. It's a huge opportunity for innovation and increasing profitability within your organization. It's also the way that you break down these data silos between different departments and foster more of a data-driven culture where everyone can really participate in helping drive toward the mission that we're going after. There's really no con to taking the time to do this because I think the conversations that I've been a part of, even with companies that have not yet made it to this point, what I'm hearing from them is that desire for everybody to get on the same page so that they can be more collaborative, even if they're not going to the full like scale of what I just described. Like they see good opportunities for good conversation to also see how can we cross-pollinate insights across the board and get that good understanding of, okay, maybe you don't see customer engagement as important as return on investment or profitability metrics, but this can help people understand how customer engagement actually applies to that. So it also helps with just like bridging that gap in
I'm sure
understanding.
insights come just from going through the process.
100%. Like I actually think that a lot of good ideas and new directions could come out of this kind of activity.
I'm more convinced of data dictionaries now than I was. In all honesty, I was like, going into this, I'm like, cool, yeah. Good idea.
Like, okay.
Like, I mean, I'm on board, but now I'm like convicted.
I know.
I'm
I
building
want
a
to do this just
conviction.
for Bonfire now.
Yeah. Even for our company sizes, like, I'm a believer.
Well, I'm glad I could convince you.
I wasn't like totally skeptical, but I was kind of like one of those things where I'm like, yeah, it's a good to do.
It's a good to do that has longevity. So the time you put into this, you will get a return on it.
And
sure.
just so many benefits.
Yeah.
That will far exceed the work, that you put into it. Great
Awesome.
conversation.
So everybody go out, make a data dictionary. Let us know how that works out for you.
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome. Well, with that, we'll end this episode and catch you on the flip side for the next one. See ya. Bye.
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.